Conduct Committee. First item on the agenda is welcome and apologies. Just to say that if I do drop out this morning, then Colette will absolutely try and get me reconnected as quickly as possible, and we'll suspend the meeting until I can rejoin. I have apologies from Chief Superintendent John Patterson this morning, and I understand that he will be represented by Detective Superintendent Katrina Henderson. Are there any other apologies? Apart from Paul Eady, who we know is trying to join us. Okay, and we're going to be joined this morning by Phil Chapman, the new Director of Operations at PERC, as an observer. So welcome, Phil. It's nice to meet you, albeit at the moment still virtually. We've also got a few new attendees from Police Scotland. We've got Chief Inspector Melanie Wade, who's seconded to the SPA from PSD, and our colleague Sergeant Paul Harkins, who's also seconded to the SPA. And we've got Sergeant Tracy Spears, Detective Superintendent Katrina Henderson, and Chief Inspector Christine Boyd. So everybody's welcome. And a regular attender now, we have Elaine Galbraith from HMI, who's attending to support any input around the Dame Ailish Angelini review reports. So that's the welcome and apologies. Can I ask, are there any declarations of interest?
Yes,
Fiona?
Alistair, sorry, I was trying to find my hand. I'm the Vice Chair of the Drugs Death Task Force. Sorry, wrong meeting. I have no declarations of interest for this case. Sorry,
well,
Alistair.
we do have an update, I think, on... No, we don't. You're right. You're okay. Yeah. Okay, so no declarations of interest. If we move on to agenda item 1.3, which is our meeting of the 2nd of March 2022, and I would ask the members to approve the draft minutes.
Yep.
We're content to do that. And then we have 1.4, which is the public minute from the private meeting of the same date. And again, I would ask the members to approve those minutes. Everybody content? Yeah. Okay, so moving on to 1.5, which is the action log and matters arising from that. We've actually got 4 actions which are proposed for closure, but following some discussions that we had in our pre-meet preparation for this today, actually there's 3 of those that I think members would consider best to be left open at this moment in time. So we have, if I can just open, I'm toggling, apologies because I'm toggling between reports here. Just open that, yeah. So 202, 20, 302, the first one there, which we've got proposed to close the analytical work, which we know has been shared with the relevant divisions, but I think the original action was really to try and share this work with the committee, which I think we would find both interesting and beneficial. So until that work is shared, we would propose to keep this open and have a discussion with Police Scotland about the best way to bring this to the committee and the most relevant time. Everybody content with that?
Yes.
Okay. The second one, excuse me, underneath this, we had intended to discuss this at our last workshop. Unfortunately, we had quite a big agenda there. So what we're hoping to do now is keep it open with a view that when we have our scheduled workshop in October, we can bring it along to that one. Okay. Toggling down, apologies again. Yeah, so the Thursday the 25th of November, 0-1 there. Again, lots of good work has gone on there, but I think we propose to keep this open and again discuss with Police Scotland, the best way we can bring this information, for the board to be both informative and helpful. So is everybody content with that? Okay, any more points on the action log? All content? Thank you. Okay, so 1.6 is our decision to take items 9 to 13 in private in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders. Do members agree to take this in private? Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Okay, so we now come to agenda item number 2, which is the SPA annual and quarterly report for the final quarter of 21-22, and this is a report for discussion. And Darren, I believe you're going to introduce and lead us through this.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our normal quarterly report, which provides comparison against the kind of previous, the year to date against the previous financial year. But as we've agreed, when we come to these annual reports, we'll also provide longer term trend information. So I'll take the sort of standard quarterly part first before moving on to the 5-year. Taking the paper as read, I'll just highlight some key points. So when we look specifically at the cases and allegations which are within the SPA's remit over the last 2 years, they've remained broadly steady. And with the exception of one anonymous case in the most recent quarter, all cases and allegations have been received in the last year from members of the public. Figure 5 shows allegations within remit by subject of complaint, and it's really just to note that there are no discernible trends in that regard. I've asked the team to look specifically at that. Similarly, in terms of figure 6, the data here is now split. You'll note that shows that whilst the majority of cases which have required a formal determination have not been upheld, actually a significant proportion of cases did not require a formal determination and were resolved through the early stage resolution process. Figure 7 shows that the average timescales to close relevant complaints, and figure 8 notes individual cases over 40 working days, which are small in number, noting that these were due to the particular complexity of these cases. I think just as we've spoken about before, we do continue to receive a significantly greater number of complaints than the authority are responsible for, the majority of which are for Police Scotland. And following a spike in cases out with the SPA's remit in Q1, the figures over the rest of the year, whilst lower, did remain slightly higher than those during the previous year. As you know, in November last year, we introduced a revised SPA website page and a form that was intended to ensure appropriate signposting. It's probably too early to draw conclusions as yet around about the impact, but we'll continue to monitor this and report once more detail is available. Moving on to the 5-year overview, the number of cases and allegations within the SPA's remit has reduced over the period. Although the number of cases out with its remit has remained broadly steady before increasing in the most recent period. The number of cases from members of the public has again remained broadly steady, whilst the number from serving or former officers or member of staff has seen an overall reduction over the period. Since 2017-18, there's been a reduction in the number of allegations about senior officers. And whilst there was a spike in 2018-19, in overall terms, there's been a steady reduction in the number of allegations about the SPA or members of SPA staff. To note in respect of outcomes, the earlier report I provided, the earlier reference I made in terms of being able to split those cases which required a formal determination against those elements which take account of early stage resolution. Unfortunately, we're unable to provide that further split prior to the 2021 period. But obviously we will be reporting that with that breakdown going forward, as we've done for the most recent 2 years. And then lastly, just to note positively, a reduction in both the average time to close relevant complaints over the 5-year period, and also in the number completed out with the 40 working days. Moving beyond the statistics, there's an update in the report at the time of writing in respect of the Strategic Oversight Group. This is the partitioned group, which predates the Dame Eilish final report. As you know, there's a separate report in terms of the SOG as part of National Governance and Reporting Arrangements for SOG, which we'll pick up later on in the agenda. The group did meet again on the 25th of May, but nothing substantive to update in respect of that more recent meeting. The update is also provided in terms of the National Complaint Handling Development Group. There is an update there around the joint SPA PERC audit of Police Scotland initial triage of complaints. And again, there's a substantive agenda item later in the meeting. Final things I would note are reference to work that the team's undertaken recently in respect of benchmarking our complaints handling procedures against good practice, both in terms of the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman and also an ISO standard in relation to an international standard on complaints handling. Whilst it's positive to show alignment with our own complaints handling procedures, we have noted a couple of areas of good practice which we intend to incorporate as part of our annual review of our procedures, which will take place later this year. And then finally, to note our ongoing participation in an international research project, which is looking to, as one of the key outcomes, is looking to develop international standards specifically in relation to police, handling of complaints in relation to policing. And I think meetings are scheduled with members of the committee to participate in that project. That's everything for me. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Darren. And I see that Paul has managed to join us. Welcome, Paul.
I've been listening in on the phone for the last few minutes, but I've finally managed to make visual contacts, which is a relief. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I think over the last 12 months, everybody's experienced connectivity issues, so you're more than welcome. And I'm glad you were able to listen in. So thanks for that introduction to this paper, Darren, and I open it up to members for discussion, comment. Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Dan, for that. There's a couple of, so I suppose if I'm asking myself the question, where is the assurance on proactive management of complaints and learning from them? I'm not sure I'm seeing a lot of this coming through. Now, it may well be because there's such a small number of complaints. So my question is categorization of what are the types of complaints and allegations that we're receiving, and do we have learning from them? There's a lot of process about, which is obviously really important. If you make a complaint, you want to make sure it's dealt with in time, appropriate time. But actually, what learning do we have about the complaints that have been upheld? Are there categorizations of it? And then I know I shouldn't, but I'm just going to ask the other question. You've talked about it since November 21. The website, the SPA websites, tried to divert complaints away. So we're still getting a lot within the authority of what we shouldn't get. And I wonder if you could comment on that as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Fiona. Sorry, Chair, apologies. So I'll maybe just take the second question first, Fiona. So I think, first of all, the change was made in November of last year. So in the grand scheme of things, it's probably too early to understand the particular impact. I do know that when we looked across the cases received over the most recent period, there have been a number of instances where contact has been made from previous correspondents who already had contact details for the authority and therefore came to us directly. However, as I say, the intention is to monitor this over a more representative period. Equally, there is work currently ongoing as part of the National Complaints Handling Development Group, which is looking at, I suppose, broader partner communications to make sure that we are all joined up in terms of directing appropriately. Finally, I would say that two things. So firstly, the team have committed to, as we've done in the past, continuing to make contact with complainants who come to us where actually their complaint should have been directed elsewhere, to specifically understand the reasons for that. And actually the team have done that most recently for the last quarter, and very much it was a case of people genuinely believing that this was the route to go, as opposed to anything else. The other thing is that whilst we've undertaken development of our own web page just now, as you'll recall, there's a wider SPA website digital project underway, where we understand that the organisation awarded a tender will be engaging with members of the public for feedback around the design of the site, both as it exists just now and in terms of testing any further changes that are made. So that provides us with another opportunity in that regard. I think in terms of your first question around about organisational learning, so first of all, when you look at the number of cases that are within the SPA remit, actually the numbers are fairly small, and I think, as I described there, actually the number of cases have actually declined over the period as well. Nevertheless, of course, we would look to identify organisational learning, and as part of any cases put forward to the committee for a formal determination, that would be a key aspect of that in terms of, I suppose, learning in general terms, as well as learning specifically in terms of our complaint handling procedures. As I mentioned, our intention is to undertake a formal review of those complaint handling procedures, I believe in August. And so we'll very specifically look to capture anything that's been identified, but certainly in terms of being able to undertake, I suppose, a thematic review over a representative period of time, that's something that we would absolutely be happy to do and bring back to the committee, but equally with the assurance that anything that has been identified in the period will already be being factored into that complaint handling procedures review that I mentioned.
Fiona, are you happy with
that's grand. Thanks, Chair. Other than content with that, if we look at November to March, that's almost half a year. So we're talking about now. And for me, it's if someone is anxious about raising a concern, then to add complexity to their procedure of, oh, actually, I want to complain about the police. I went to the authority and they said it wasn't them and they sent me back to the police. It's more to make it an improved procedure for the people who've got concerns and anxieties. That I think is important. But no, I'm content that we wait for the review of complaints handling and see how things are going. Thanks.
Yeah, just before I bring Grant in, I know that right across the public sector, this is a major focus for Scottish Government, and they've got a programme around their open government work that is to try and some people would like a single point of contact, and then you get appropriately signposted to the right agency to make any complaint. That seems to be almost the holy grail of discussion, but it is a lot more difficult and complex than that. And accessing things digitally is not, for everybody. So it is a difficult issue, but it's something that we need. I'm in total agreement with Fiona here. We need to, keep on top of this. It's something that is, a topic of discussion. Much wider than just within policing. So we would appreciate that. Grant, and unless Alan wants to come in on the same topic.
Yeah, Dad, thanks, Alistair. I just wanted to make an observation from Police Scotland. Dame Ailish commented on accessibility to the complaint handling process, and probably over the last 18 months we've done quite a lot of work in this space. We've built on some of the experiences of COVID, so you can now access complaints via QR code. It's online, so I think there is some work that probably colleagues at the SPA could draw on that would make in your design of your website really explicitly clear about where complaints would actually sit, and potentially even include our QR code on your website where it's a lower level complaint. So I think that's one of the areas where we have made quite a bit of headway over the last period of time.
Yeah, that's helpful, and I'm sure the team within the SPA will link in closely with the relevant colleagues within Police Scotland. So sorry, Grant, to have kept you waiting there.
No, don't, Chair. And in fact, Alan Spear's comment just now is actually quite relevant to what I was going to say, because I think following up to the comments Fiona's making, I was also going to raise the question about how quickly are we able to make some real progress for the people who are making complaints, and they genuinely, as Darren says, are making them to the SPA, either because they've done that in the past or because they're not absolutely sure of the way forward. We need to make this an easier process for them. So I know that you said that there's further design changes, but we've been told about design changes to the website for quite a while. And I do think we should perhaps at our next meeting, by which time you've got a further few months experience, have a further look at what is actually coming through of the number of complaints where the SPA are approached, what is actually happening and how quickly are they able to drill down into the type of reason for approaching us, and how quickly we're able to redirect them and signpost them off in the right way to make it as easy as possible for the complainer to get some satisfaction that action has been taken without a lot further work by them. The second reason I wanted to raise point I want to raise was in relation to paragraph 210.1 and figure 14. I note that the text says it's not possible to provide a further breakdown of the allegations determined as others in earlier years. But, you know, even if you take the current year and last year, 2021 and 21-22, we've got just virtually everything is in other, and there must be some way of breaking that down into some meaningful form that we can actually make some sense of. It just doesn't make much sense to see just upheld 0, other, current 15, ongoing 7, total 22, and last year everything in other. There must be a better way of presenting that, surely. That's it.
Yes, apologies, Grant. So we've provided that breakdown for the last 2 years because of the inability to break that down any further in terms of the preceding 3 years. Based on the data reported at the time, we've simply showed it in that way to provide a like-for-like comparison. But certainly, the section at figure 6 on page 7 breaks that down very specifically in terms of early stage resolution, abandoned, withdrawn, closed, and those requiring a formal determination as upheld or not upheld. And as I mentioned, that the commitment is absolutely to provide that breakdown going forward.
Yes, it's just the way it's all linked together. When I in getting the right figure up again, figure 14. No, sorry, I was in the wrong one there. Figure 10, I mean. No, sorry, my apologies. I'm flicking through the different screens and I've my apologies. It was figure 14 that I really feel, even if we can't go back in time to earlier years, surely we can actually provide a slightly better analysis of 2021 and 21-22 than is given here. even if it's cross-referenced to other figures. Maybe I'm missing something here, but I just find that the way it is presented just makes me wonder where else I can get the analysis I'm looking for.
So Grant, as I say, that breakdown is provided at that earlier figure 6, and I suppose what I would note is, just as we did last year, the intention is to do again this year in terms of a full committee-specific annual report. So when we go to develop that annual report, I can make sure that correlation is clear.
Right, thank you. I'll have a further look at it, and if I'm still unclear about certain aspects, I'll get back to you offline. Thank you. You're mute, Chair. Alistair, you're mute.
Sorry. Is there any further questions from anybody on this? I suppose, ultimately, Darren, what we're looking for is what does good look like, and how do we know we have arrived at good, if you ever do, or we are taking the right steps. I think that's what you're seeking to do here, and that's what the members' questions have been designed to try and draw out. So I think we've got some actions from there. You're going to review the design of the site, to help those that wish to complain to come to us if it's necessary or be redirected. And obviously, the accessibility of sites moves apace as technology moves apace, and you're going to link in with colleagues in Police Scotland to see what improvements they've been making and success or not that they've been having with that. Organisational learning is something we're really keen to see, because that helps us on that journey to good. You mentioned there that we may, even though the complaints are fairly small, we will do a thematic review, and we can draw learning down from that. And then when you do the annual report, that like-for-like comparison, slightly more detail behind other, we'll pick up on that. And again, that helps us to understand the journey that we've been on. So does that sound like a fair summary, members, of what we've been looking at this paper?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for presenting that, Darren. So we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Police Scotland's Professional Standards Annual and Quarterly Performance Report for final quarter of 21-22. And in Chief Superintendent John Patterson's absence, we're going to have Detective Superintendent Katrina Henderson, I believe, presenting this to us. So, Katrina.
Chair, just apologies. The papers will be presented by me today, and I'll draw on others. It's probably a bit of administrative shortcomings at our end. So, as usual, I'll talk to the papers that are highlighted for this morning. Okay.
Well, we've got no problems with that, and we welcome you presenting this paper to us. So, thanks very much.
Okay, thanks very much, folks. There's a lot of detail within the paper, but I'll just draw out a range of observations, and then pause in between myself and the team. Will be happy to take your questions. So what's apparent from the detail contained within the paper is that over the course of the year that has just passed, we've seen a 6.7% reduction in the number of complaints made, and as a consequence of that, the number of complaint allegations have reduced as well, down 8% over the course of the year. That's interesting when we also look at the 5-year average, because we see a downward trend in the number of complaints. Specific to this quarter, the complaints are down 18% based on the previous year. There are probably a couple of caveats, I guess, to the previous year, in so much as the COVID picture a year ago looked very different from it did just now. So there's a couple of instances where I think the figures maybe look slightly better because of some of the impact that COVID has had on us. When we look at the conduct, so there is detail right throughout the report around regional complaint handling, and happy to take any questions. We've also got some detail contained within the report around conduct, and particularly in relation to the number of preliminary conduct assessments that are carried out. Over the course of the quarter, we've carried out 69. Again, that reflects a reduction on the previous year. Conduct is a little bit different, and it just it can be down to a timing issue in terms of when matters present for conduct. But in the same period, we've also seen 7 officers who've either retired or resigned in advance of progressing to what would have been gross misconduct meetings. So that's a trend that always exists, that probably before the point of those hearings taking place, officers would either retire or resign. There is quite a lot of detail here too around the role and remit of PERC and the number of referrals that we've made to PERC. And the report highlights that we've made 62 statutory referrals to PERC. Again, the 2 areas where the numbers are probably a little bit higher than the previous year is in our use of taser. As you're aware, a taser discharge is an automatic referral, and we've seen in the course of this year an increased number of referrals where it's injury within the custody environment. Again, I would caveat that highly with it. The previous year, our custody throughput was far lower than what it has been in the course of this year. And as you know, we actually reduced the number of custody holding stations and looked at how we handled arrests and the like in those circumstances. There is also some detail in the report, Chair, that relates to the statutory referrals around Article 3 and Article 5, where it's assault or use of excessive force. That's been a change within the course of this year, so it presents some factual information as opposed to drawing some comparisons. So it's going to take us a cycle of 12 months before we'll be able to draw some additional information from that. I think also in the PERC space, it's worthy of noting that there were 46 complaint handling reviews carried out over the course of the year, and again, that's those instances where complainants don't feel satisfied in the way in which Police Scotland have handled their complaints. Of that number, only 14 came back to Police Scotland with recommendations from PERC that there was some further action that we should take. So I would consider that in the scale of the volume of complaints that we're handling to be incredibly positive. So just touched on a couple of headlines from complaint handling, from a referral process into PERC, and I touched a little bit on conduct, and probably I'll pick more up in the conduct space, as you know, later on in the course of the meeting. So I'm probably just on that basis happy just to pause, Chair, and just let yourself and members ask any questions from the broader report.
You're on mute, Chair.
Well, I think this is the 3rd time I've had to apologise already in this meeting for my lack of IT skills. Let's hope there's not a 4th, but I can't promise that. Apologies. So, Paul.
Yeah, I've got a couple of areas I just wanted to look at. Firstly is in relation to C3 performance, and the complaints are down on PYTD by 5%, but 41% increase over the 5-year average. And I see there's a reference to analytical work having taken place in this. So I wonder if you can give us an explanation for the increase and about where we are with the analytical work.
Apologies, Chair, and Paul, could you maybe just highlight the page that you're on? It's quite a detailed report. It'd be easier just if I could flick to the page.
Sorry, it's I'm looking at the area, the bit relating to C3 on complaints. Page 7 is where the stat is.
And again, just if you don't mind, just remind me of your question.
It's the reference to C3 complaints and the 5% increase, or 5.4 decrease rather, past year to date, and the 41% increase over the 5-year average. And there's a reference about some analytical work having taken place to look into this, presumably. So I'm just interested in the explanation, principally for both sets of figures would be useful.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that we were really keen to look at was in the space of C3, it's a virtual call centre, as you know. So the first available call handler will take the next available call. So part of our analysis was just to try and understand if there's variations in the way in which call handlers operate, say in Bilston Glen in Edinburgh versus Govan or versus Dundee. So a large part of our focus was just to look to see if there was any kind of significant anomalies that were coming in that space. Largely, that's not the case, and largely the complaints that are filtering into C3, it's not so much about the way in which the call handler has handled the call. Quite often those complaints are in the space of quality of service. So, you know, a member of the public may be coming back to C3 because they don't particularly like the way in which the police have handled the call, but it's the actual police response. So quite a lot of those complaints are specific to quality of service. And quite often from our perspective, we can resolve them very quickly through a kind of frontline resolution. So these are kind of reviews that we would just take forward very frequently to be confident that we're handling those calls as best we can. So that's the detail in that. What it also shows is it's quite reflective of complaint handling performance across the country, and that we're seeing reduction in complaints that are specific to C3.
Grand. So that then leads me neatly on to quality of service, as I'm looking at table 1 on page 8, and the number of allegations are significantly up for quality of service in a couple of 2 or 3 areas, and it's again, what's the story behind this?
Again, part of our challenge here is just probably plays into the much broader discussion around the availability of resources, the demand that has been placed on local policing resources and our ability to respond to those instances, and the need for us to look at how we prioritise our calls. So a critical part of the work for us then is through our monthly engagement. PSD, our professional standards, would on a monthly basis engage with the local policing division and provide a much more detailed breakdown for the divisional area. I know in the report we focus on the sort of east, west and north, but in kind of month to month we would engage directly with the division and provide them with a series of statistics and entering a conversation with the division about complaints specific to their area. And one of the challenges for us right now is just that ability to meet the supply, the demand part to meet the supply part, and it takes us into broader discussions about how we're handling calls that might not necessarily be, you know, front and centre for the police. So issues around mental health and some of the broader range of incidents that we're having now to deal with.
Because I'm looking at the increases in Glasgow and Lanarkshire for quality service policy and procedure, and they're like 160% increase and 193%. Now, I'm assuming, looking at the raw data or the increase, it's because they're quite small figures normally, that it looks bad. Is that, am I correct in that assumption? Yeah, okay.
Exactly correct. So what we would always do in terms of assessing those complaints is go to our standard operating procedures and look specifically at what's there. So when there's any deviation from what is proposed within the standard operating procedures, then we would highlight that in the complaint. So increases of that size, I guess the backdrop of reducing complaints is on the basis that the numbers of those complaints are small.
Grand. The last one was the one of spotted and discriminated behaviour, which has gone up by 16%. Now, I know Police Scotland have done a lot of work on this, but that seems to be still, you know, still problematic. It's not going in the right direction. Again, what's the story behind this?
I guess part of the challenge is, as I indicated a few moments ago, comparing against previous year to date, where we had a lot of significant period the previous year where we had lockdown, with different regulations in place for COVID. We're drawn against a bit of an artificial picture. So I mean,
that's not
we
lost
look
in me.
at them 120 allegations against, you know, probably 9,000-10,000 allegations. Whilst they're all really important and we are looking at them, we probably will need to look at a better trend line. And this report, unfortunately, as we would always do, compared it on the previous year. So there are some caveats around that, but it's one area that I'm happy just to go away and have a bit of a deeper dive in terms of some of the learning and maybe bring that back to committee next time.
Grand, appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Alan. Fiona?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Alan. And, you know, as you say, there's a lot of detail in this report, and I think more analysis and data would be helpful in terms of being able to compare and contrast rather than necessarily the narrative just over quarter to quarter. So it would be keen to see the report continue to develop. So what's in my mind is the same as the SPA questions, is what's happening here and how do we know we're improving and how do we know we're learning. And I think there seems to be, if I'm going to take the issue that Paul raised in terms of quality of service delivery, so I would look forward to seeing a bit more information on that, because, you know, is that it took 5 days to respond to a call, which, if I'm being honest, I'm using that for the sake of emphasis because if that's what's happened in England, or is it because I didn't like the way the police officer knocked my door? You know, it feels to me as though there can be quite broad things, and I'm not saying the smaller areas are not important, but for me it would be helpful to have a sense of the magnitude and the complexities of the complaints, perhaps a bit more broken down. If I'm allowed, I'll just give you my list. I understand what you're saying. 46 complaints go up to PIRC, only 14 came back, but that's about a third. So a third of the complaints that go up to PIRC, they're saying, actually, we feel you could do better. And a note on your learning note, you talk about, there's a lot about process of investigation. So can police officers notes and responses not mirror exactly other people's? Can it have an independence to it? You know, can they remember to note down and log what's happening in complaints, so the complaints process? But I'd be interested in some of the learning to prevent further complaints. So if someone has raised a complaint about something, what action's been taken across the force so that we know that it's not going. It's not that it's not going to happen again, but reduce the likelihood. And also what you're doing to check. And then my last one is about the referrals to, so the statutory referrals to PIRC, I think are of interest, clearly, but they're routine and statutory, so they're, and it would be helpful to understand what PIRC say about that. So if it's, you know, if it's drawing firearms or drawing tasers, in a way that's routine and therefore not inappropriate, but what I'm assuming they will investigate and tell you. So I think some feedback loop on that at some stage, and it may well be, I'm just not joining the dots, that we're actually getting that of the, you know, I don't know, 50 times or 100 times that tasers were drawn over the year. This is what PIRC said about it. It may well be that we're getting it elsewhere. So sorry, and I probably think I should have given you these up and divided doses, Alan, but that's my thoughts and my questions.
Thanks very much, Fiona. I've actually learned to use a pen when you're speaking, so I think I've managed to take a couple of notes as we're going. So I think I don't disagree with any of the commentary that you've made around quality of service, and what I would probably like to do is to do at the same time a deeper dive on both discriminatory behaviour and the quality of service, and maybe bring a bespoke report to the next committee. And what we'll be able to do, just by the timing of this part of the year, we'll look at the data from 21-22. So we'll do a deeper dive based on a few years' data. So rather than start to probably break down, and I could offer lots of comments about where the quality of service issues are. And it's as you describe, you know, the member of the public expected a quicker response. They expected a different chap at the door. They maybe looked for a different outcome. But if you can bear with me, I will bring that back to the next meeting, You touched then on complaint handling reviews, and I know PERC will probably talk to their position on this a little bit later. I understand what you're saying. It's a third of referrals, but I still have to probably, from an organisational perspective, measure that 46 against thousands of complaints that we receive and a small number. On a positive note, quite often the feedback from PERC through the complaint handling process is, the explanations that we've provided or the way in which we've articulated some commentary in a letter probably needs a little bit further work. So there's fewer occasions where PERC are saying your investigation could have been better or you could have done more. It's probably quite often how we articulate a position back to an individual complainer. But I'm conscious I'm now stepping into Phil and Elia's space. But I understand what you're saying, but I see that as a huge positive, and the public should be confident in our complaint handling, given the small number of people who do refer matters onto PERC. In terms of the learning from complaints, firstly, as you'll understand, complaint handling is a topic of conversation at local scrutiny boards. So in preparation for that, we're engaging directly with divisions, and we sit down with the divisional commander and support superintendents to talk through the complaints space, the PERC space, the conduct space, and it is very specific to them. And from those reports, we draw out a tailored report for that division, and there is a lot of detail contained within that would be relevant to their area and draws on, you could be in Fife and you're drawing more complaints from Glenrothes than you are from Kirkcaldy. So we do go into a fairly bit of granular detail. We probably could do it here, but I would probably have to quadruple the size of this report. But at any point in time, I could present for you an illustration of what we take into a local policing division, and that is done on a monthly basis. The last comment or the last question you spoke about was statutory referrals to PERC, and again, Phil's on the call and will take a view. There are certain circumstances where the statutory referrals, they just flow. So one of the big changes over the last few years has been the rollout of Taser within Police Scotland, and those instances where we would use, and with Taser, it's not a case of pointing a firearm, it's a discharge of a Taser. The officers, as you know, are trained to a really high standard in their use and assessment of Taser, and those matters are thereafter referred to PERC, and it's then a matter for PERC to determine from all of those statutory referrals which ones they would want to investigate and which ones they would choose not to. So I probably wouldn't step on Phil's toes, but allow him maybe later to offer a comment about the rationale on which referrals, if you like, they would choose to investigate or not. I think that was the kind of 4 or 5 kind of key things that I took from your questions.
No, perfect. Thanks. That's really helpful, and I look forward to the further information. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, thanks, Fiona, for your questions and your responses there, Alan. And PERC are next on the agenda, so if there's anything they want to come back in and highlight or illustrate further, I'm sure they'll take that opportunity. Grant?
Thanks, Chair. Alan, the question I've got is in relation to chart 5 on page 11 of your report. I'm very pleased to see the significant reduction in the category of irregularity in procedure. I know from past meetings there's been comment made about the significant number of standard operating procedures and a lot of work going into analysing them, updating them and refining them and perhaps reducing the number of them. But I wonder whether there's any information you've got as to, within that category, which of the procedures causes the most problems, and so therefore which ones perhaps need to be made more clear. And that rolls forward into the theme of continuous improvement, the sort of learning and division and training required by division to try and address this on an ongoing basis. Ideally, I'm sure none of us would like to see 3,722 cases in a year's time, say. So on the theme of continuous improvement, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what's been done in that sort of category.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
so the kind of policy space sits with my portfolio as well, and part of the challenge we've had probably over the last 3 years is to look at all of our policies and all of our guidance documents and look at how do we get to a position where we have a much more manageable number, because I'm always conscious that we will always be measured against what's in policy. So on a really positive note, we have dramatically reduced the number of guidance documents that exist for the force, and we have completed the first phase of looking. In some instances, we've removed policies and we've turned them into guidance. But for those more significant policies, and I'm thinking about ones that we would use on a very regular basis, we've turned them into toolkits, which is more accessible on our website for officers, but actually it's more practical in their use. So that work has been ongoing for a period of time, and I think it's a really positive step we've taken forward. What I can't do off the cuff, Grant, is probably comment that far on which aspects of irregularity and procedure are probably the drivers for the number of complaints. And probably it's another matter I would probably have to defer and bring a little bit of detail back, and probably also look at it in the context of sort of 5-year average, given that, you know, it's down on last year, but for all the similar reasons as I've already indicated, it's difficult to say. So I wouldn't mind having a closer look at which of our policies would be the drivers specific to this. It could be it'll be things that we deal with on a very regular basis. So it will look at our sort of missing persons toolkit. There'll be the kind of common themes that we would deal a lot with on a daily basis. But again, I would like to probably just do a little bit more work and be able to update you more fully.
Right, thank you. I think that would be very helpful, Alan. Thank you. But I do recognise the significant progress being made. It's just if we can learn a bit more, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Any final questions from members or anybody else at this point? Okay, so I think actually Grant summed that up quite well. The theme of all those questions was about continuous improvement. How are you using the data and the information, to improve the quality of service, which came out, and I think we recognise the interdependencies there with other parts of the organisation and other agencies. Paul highlighted C3. Now C3 we know is absolutely on the front line because it's very often the first point of contact, with the policing, and then how that connects to the rest of the organisation. And we had discussions around that. We will have discussions around some of the issues within C3 at People Committee tomorrow, which I think will help there. You did offer there, Alan, in relation to Paul's question about discriminatory behaviour, to have a further look at that and maybe bring back a paper, to look at that in more detail. In terms of Fiona's questions, again, continuous improvement, but maybe Kirk will pick up in the next item if there's so many answers there that need a little bit illustration and highlighting. Really pleased, actually, when you were speaking, responding to Fiona, is the mentioning the local scrutiny boards and helping with understanding the layers of assurance that are out there, and the more detail that could be gone into, because it's much more relevant at a locality. So that's a really positive thing actually to hear about, and then that again positive to hear about the focus on policy space, reducing the number of guidance documents, providing toolkits, to drive out any irregularities in process and just make the organisation more easy to navigate, for those that work within it, and therefore helping them to deliver a service to the public. And then the last thing really was you've made that offer to look at some of the what's driving irregularity in process and bring back in further detail. So I think that's where we got to on that one. But the theme, continuous improvement, and actually I took from that reassurance that you're working on that, and the detail will give us the assurance. So thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 4, which is the quarterly report on Police Scotland handling of complaints. Ilya.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Okay, I'll provide a brief overview of our update report. As you'll see, in Q4, we received 66 applications for a complaint handling review, roughly in line with our average quarterly intake. Our final figure for last year was 271 applications for a complaint handling review. This figure remains relatively steady, as you will see from the report, in the last 2 to 3 years. I think the figures provided are roughly between 270 and 279 applications over the last 3 years. So relatively steady demand for a complaint handling review from members of the public. In terms of the timescales, we've included timescales for provision of information during the complaint handling review. You'll see that those, again, remain quite steady. We were hoping that perhaps those will reduce with the implementation of the new complaint handling model. It hasn't filtered through as yet. You'll see that on average, we're still waiting for about 49 days on average to receive the information from the Professional Standards Department in order for us to progress complaint handling reviews. So some of the cases, naturally, that we've been dealing with this year were still cases that have been previously handled by the local divisions. So some of the papers that have been delayed, perhaps associated with trying to get those papers from the divisions. In terms of the CHR reports issued, this year, we've issued 212 CHR reports, a slight reduction from the last year of 9%, and we've reviewed 817 individual complaint allegations. The number of the CHRs issued in Q4 increased by 29% from Q3. The average number of heads of complaint in Q4 was 3.4 per CHR report. Again, that varies slightly. I can say that at the moment we have a significant number of cases under review with a quite significant number of allegations, and those increase the national averages. In terms of the outcome, you'll see that the Q4 was a relatively good quarter in terms of PSD's performance. 71% of the complaints reviewed in Q4 were deemed to be handled to a reasonable standard, so that's pleasing. It's in line with the last year's average figure. In terms of national breakdown in Q4, you'll see that PSD East performed the strongest and closely followed by North and West. PSD East were at the 84% reasonably handled, so that's very good progress being made in that area. PSD West perhaps was with the lowest figure with the 66% reasonably handled. In terms of the annual total, you'll see that this year the number of reasonably handled complaints dropped very slightly to 68%. Last year the figure was 71%. I think this year was quite important to see how Police Scotland will perform, just to try to make sure that the success of last year wasn't a one-off, but it was rather a sustained improvement. So it's pleasing to see that the figure is very close to the last year's, sitting at 68%. We've included some data on the recommendations, reconsideration directions issued this year. You'll see no reconsideration directions with supervision have been issued this year, so that's obviously a positive sign. Number of recommendations remains relatively steady. A bit of an increase in terms of the number of learning point during this year. Again, just kind of emphasizing that our focus a lot is primarily on learning and improvement as the outcome of the complaint handling process. You'll see at the end of the report, we've included a breakdown of the recommendations made this year. There is a pie chart which provides you with a breakdown of different recommendations made. 34% of the recommendations related to insufficient inquiries being carried out. 39% of recommendations related to the quality of the final responses. And finally, 15% of the recommendations related to the manner in which Police Scotland recorded individual complaints. So it may be instances where a number of complaints have been addressed as one complaint rather than separating them into individual allegations. And that's probably all update I have thus far. Happy to take any questions from the committee.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ilya. As always, excellent introduction and a very fulsome report that you've provided to us. So I open it up to members for questions, and Fiona, if you'd like to lead us off on this.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ilya, for that. So there's probably a recurring theme from earlier on in the meeting. The increased, so the time to get the paperwork over to PIRC has not improved. And I don't know whether you in Police Scotland, so I don't know whether it's an Alan to answer or Ilya to answer, but when would we expect that? Because there's significant resource going into it. We've got a new complaint system. We were advised that would reduce. So I'd be interested to know when we can expect that when we can expect to see an improvement in that. The other aspect is you've talked about learning points, and I would like to see a bit more granular detail about, what are the learning points, and also at some time in the future, evidence that actually that has happened. So an audit trail of, we found X amount of areas for improvement, and at some stage, whether it's yourselves or possibly more Police Scotland would come back and say, these are the things that we've done, and as a consequence of that, we've seen a reduction in the number of complaints, because particularly the recurring themes that we would want to at least reduce, if not eliminate. And then there is the statutory referrals to PIRC. It may well be that I noticed it earlier on last year and I've forgotten about it, but how does that get reported in terms of drawing of firearms and use of taser? How do we get a sense of the monitoring and review of that, and whether or not PIRC's content?
Thank you, Fiona. In terms of provision of papers, I think it probably will be difficult for me to answer what is the root cause of the delays. Certainly, we engage with the PSD admin staff in terms of getting the papers to us, the ones that perhaps have been delayed. What the root cause of it is, perhaps maybe Alan is best placed to address it. Certainly, in terms of the way the new model is set up, I think it would be reasonable to expect an improvement in those timescales, whereby all of the information in terms of complaint handling is now sits within the professional standards department. So we were hoping that the new model would hopefully speed up the provision of the information, and that would certainly assist us with the completing our complaint handling reviews a little bit more quickly. In terms of learning point, I'll just address that very quickly. When we make learning points or any recommendations, those remain open until they're fully implemented by Police Scotland. This may, in certain cases, take a little bit more time to implement. So the learning point might be individual learning points. So in learning for complaint handlers or maybe officers subject of the complaint, there could be a much wider, more organisational points, learning points, whereby we may be asking Police Scotland to review a policy or perhaps consider developing more detailed guidance to the officers where we think that might be of assistance. But ultimately, all of those learning points remain open, and we're in discussion with the PSD to make sure that those are implemented. I take your point on board that it probably would be helpful to provide a little bit more detailed analysis of those learning points. That's something I'll take away from this meeting. But and finally, in terms of the statutory referrals, I don't know if Phil wants to add something, but I think it probably would be fair to say that my team and my department are primarily tasked with reviewing the handling of the complaints by the police. Certainly, I'm not the best placed person to discuss the statutory referrals. So, Phil, I don't know if you want to come in on this point.
Phil, if you want to come in, feel free here.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just for awareness, as Director of Operations, I've got both sides of the business in terms of the complaint handling review and the investigation side. So to answer Fiona's point earlier on in relation to statutory referrals, clearly the police refer, and as in statute, a requirement of the Chief Constable to refer the deaths, serious injuries, various other things like taser, presentation of firearms, and so on and so forth. So to put a context on that, we have about 300 referrals per annum. I can give figures, and some of it's becoming clear as I'm observing. The purpose of me observing the meeting was just to see what value we can add to the committee. Is that there is statistics we probably could provide to the committee on a quarterly basis to complement what EOIA is providing in terms of CHRs, but in the investigation space. The caveat I would put to that is obviously the Crown-directed investigations. We wouldn't and wouldn't be appropriate, obviously, to refer that to this committee. However, the ones where there's a statutory referral from the Chief Constable, we have approximately 10% per annum that we actually take to full investigation, but every referral that comes to us goes through a rigorous process of assessment, whereby essentially we ask for full facts and circumstances from Police Scotland. We then look at that based against training, standard operating procedures, the availability now of digital media, whether it's CCTV and so on and so forth. And if we review that and consider that there is something that requires to be investigated, then we call that in as for a full investigation, put a notification back to ACC Spears and his team so they're aware that we have in effect and essentially started a full investigation in relation to that. What we produce at the end is a report that goes back to the Chief Constable, depending on the facts and circumstances. It is publicly available. We do publish some of these online, obviously redacted for obvious reasons. But whereas recommendations and learning going back to Police Scotland, again, I think that's an area where we could complement EOIA's work in terms of the oversight of the committee and your awareness of the kind of, we're recommending something's done. Are the police then following through on that? Because obviously the recommendations in the main are broad recommendations in relation to organisational change and such like. So I'd be happy, Chair, if you are content with that we adapt slightly EOIA's current report and its current iteration and include within it the investigations, statutory referral and other information round about the recommendations and the trackers that we keep in relation to updates from Police Scotland, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that response and that offer there, Phil, and I personally am content, but I'll just look round my fellow committee members.
I think that sounds sensible, but I'm just wondering, does it already go to another committee, say policing and performance? As long as we're not double counting, but if it doesn't, I think it's helpful.
Our reports go back to the Chief Constable via ACC Spears, and there is a requirement that they report back to us in terms of recommendations made in terms of whether they agree essentially with the recommendation and what the outcome was of any organisational change.
So I'm looking around and everybody seems to be in agreement with that. I think it absolutely will add value and give us better insight, understanding, and the assurance that we're looking for. So thank you for that, Phil. Alan, did you wish to come back in and you can comment on that? But I'm presuming that the root cause of delays in paperwork is what you wanted to respond to.
Yeah, you've read my mind, Alistair, but just a comment on the latter point there. So we do record all the recommendations that flow from PERC through our audit and risk function. So they're recorded in the exact same manner in which an HMICS inspection or our internal auditors would do. And some of that detail is reported and contained within the ARAC report, Audit and Risk Committee. But just to give you a real confidence that the data does exist and we work hard on it. So happy for that information to be discussed here. I think just to the earlier point around timescales, yeah, absolutely committed to trying to aspire to getting the information to PERC within 14 days. Not by any shape or form is it an excuse, but I am hugely reliant on drawing the information down from local policing divisions. And we're working really hard to try and ensure that comes in as a timeliest fashion as we possibly can. And what I absolutely don't do is provide the information to PERC in a piecemeal fashion. So sometimes we're relying on, officers hit a run of days off, or there can be some reasons. But I will take again a piece of work to have a closer look at trying to work in this new financial year to achieve the 14 days that we've set out. I still firmly believe that it's an achievable target, so I'll work hard to do it, but there are a number of factors which impact adversely on that. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that's appreciated, Alan. Thank you. Grant.
Thanks, Chair. Ilya, thank you very much for your report. I think it's very clear. I just wanted to drill down a little bit more into the final page, actually, page 8, in relation to the quality of the final response letters that Police Scotland send to complainers. I know it's very difficult to get these letters written in, say, shall we say, plain English, or giving the right content. And I wondered if you could say a little bit about if there's any information given in relation to how that's analysed between area and division, or whether in fact it's a particular problem in one particular area so that further training or guidance or help can be given to, in the spirit of continuous improvement, to avoid these things coming up time and time again. Anything you can say about how that can be further drilled down would be helpful. And I'm keen to see any recommendations that you've got actually producing a better outcome over time. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Grant. I think in terms of the quality of the final response, I think looking back over the last few years, you'll probably find that the sufficiency of the complaint inquiry and the quality of the final response probably have remained quite steady in terms of being around 35% each of all the recommendations that we're making. There can be a number of reasons behind those recommendations. It may be wrong application of the balance of probabilities test when making the final determination. It may be simply that insufficient information has been provided to enable member of the public to understand why the complaint has been not upheld. There are a number of reasons. One of the things I think we need to take cognizance of is that there is also, with the new model coming into play, and a number of new members of PSD staff being recruited, I think it's probably fair to say that it would probably take complaint handlers some time to perhaps adjust and learn how to write a good letter. It is a little bit of an art to write a good letter, and it probably takes a little bit of time to learn that trade. We certainly in the past have delivered training inputs to professional standards and also the local divisions to give complaint handlers some good tips and advice in terms of how to write a good letter, how to structure it, what should be and shouldn't be included. I think probably going forward in the year ahead, it's something that we should revisit again and probably look to deliver some more inputs to the complaint handlers within the PSD new model. It's an issue that has always been there. The quality of the final responses. So again, sometimes there could be a number of reasons, as I say, but previously I think, and perhaps maybe that's the reason why those have not really improved, those kind of two categories, is because of the turnover of staff who were dealing with the complaints. I think the frustration that we've experienced in the past is that individuals who, officers who have been promoted to the rank where they would be tasked with dealing with the complaints, stayed in that role for maybe 18 months to 2 years before they moved on. So our task was to try to get them up to speed, to try to deliver some training inputs to help them to learn how to handle complaints competently. But before too long, they would move on and the cycle would start again. Again, less experienced individuals would be tasked with dealing with the complaints, and again, we would see the same problems reoccur. Right. So again, with the new model, with the kind of more set kind of structure of the complaint handlers, I think there is a real opportunity to try to improve at least that specific area, because where we have now a set number of complaint handlers within PSD retaining such a vast number of the complaints, rather than sending them to the division to deal with, I think there is a real opportunity to try to raise standards by delivering some very specific training inputs to those individuals.
Thank you very much. That's very positive, Leah. Thank you. It looks as if Alan Spears wants to come in on this too.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I really just wanted to reinforce the comments that Elia has made. So the whole purpose of us moving in the early part of the last financial year to the current complaint handling model was part to address this. So we don't have any complaints now being handled out with Police Scotland. So we have a fewer number of people involved in the process and writing those letters. So I think with a degree of confidence, we'll see some progress. What I would say is that I do still think we spend a disproportionate amount of time in trying to detail letters. So a really low-level complaint that might have 7 or 8 allegations could take days for us to write because it could result in a 15-page letter. So there is a real fine balance within Police Scotland, but I'm confident that the quality of those letters we'll get it right, just by our ability to retain complaints.
Good. Thank you. That's very helpful and very positive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any, excuse me, final comments or questions on this item? Okay, another good discussion. The new complaints handling system, new model. I think you refer to it now, Alan, as the current complaints handling model. It's bedding in, but we're going to have a look at the root cause of the paperwork being out with the 14 days. So we're going to have a look at that. What we're also going to do is we're going to improve our understanding around statutory referrals with the additional report that's going to come to us in relation to that. And in terms of quality of the final response, the letters, we look that the new model will actually improve that for us as well. Is there anything that anybody wants to add that we've not captured there? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on. Ilya, I think we're staying with yourself and we're beginning really our journey through Day Mailish. So 5 is your the joint audit between the SPA and PERC, an update on that, which is one of Dame Mellish's recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. I've prepared a brief update report just to update the committee where we are with the audit. As you will see, stage 1 of the audit, scoping and methodology, has been completed. We've obtained all the relevant information. The spokes have been identified, and we've managed to gather all the relevant information and do some background work before we commence stage 2. In terms of stage 2, the field work, you'll see that we have undertaken on-site examination of files on the 7th, between 7th and 28th of March. This was done by mixture of working on site in Dalmarnock as well as working remotely, where the SBA complaints team were able to access some of the files remotely via their access to the Centurion. I've provided the numbers of the files that have been examined by the audit team. Some of the files in that sample have been identified as the ones where the PERC perhaps had some involvement, so those have been substituted with additional files. Just to make sure that there is that transparency and there is no previous involvement by the PERC in any of the cases that we have examined. Since our work on site has been completed in terms of examination of the files, we have also shadowed the Encaro staff just to develop a better understanding of the processes and how they approach the initial assessment of the complaints. We've also interviewed a number of Encaro staff again, to gain a better understanding of procedures, processes, workloads, training, and so on. Thereafter, we've proceeded to undertake a peer review to ensure that within the audit team itself, the manner of the assessment of all the files is consistent. So I can advise that the stage 2 is almost complete, and we are shortly moving into stage 3, which will be the analysis of evidence. So a very brief report at the update report at this stage, but we are making progress, as I say, and we are, I think, on course to meet the timescales that we stated in our terms of reference by seeking to finalise the audit in Q2.
Thank you very much for that, Ilya. Open it up to members. Any questions at this stage? No. Oh, Fiona?
I'm just wondering, I note at the end it will go to the Chief Constable, the final report, but I'm thoughtful about its handling, and will it weave its way to this committee at some stage?
I'm sure in due course we'll provide the report, but naturally we'll complete the report. We'll have a discussion with the Police Scotland about the findings. The report will be published, and certainly the copy will definitely can be provided to the committee in due course. Absolutely.
Sorry, Chair, when exactly will it be published? Do you know?
There's not a definitive date, Paul, but we're looking to complete the audit in Q2.
Right, which is when?
End of September.
End of September. Yeah, because SPA quarters are different, I think, from everyone else's. Grand, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful update there, Ilya, and things seem to be on track. It's good joint working. Stage 3 commenced 22nd of June, I believe. So we do look forward, as Paul's just asked, to and Fiona as well, to seeing that final report. It'll be very interesting to see what the outcomes are. Thank you. Okay, we move on now to agenda item number 6. So 6.1, the independent review complaints handling investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing. We've got a report for discussion, and Darren, you're going to lead us through this.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular update on progress to deliver against recommendations where either Dame Eilish herself or Scottish Government subsequently identified a specific implementation role for the authority, as well as others where the SPA have ourselves identified a role or an implication for ourselves. So the updated action plan is set out in the appendix, and for ease of reference, those which are specifically for the SPA are highlighted in yellow. That is being used to inform submissions to Scottish Government as part of the National Governance and Reporting Arrangements, and the most recent submission was made on the 4th of April. So of a total of 31 recommendations, which, as I say, cover those specifically directed to the SP or others where we've identified a role, actions linked with 21 of those are marked as complete or proposed for completion. And of those specifically for the SPA, only 4 are outstanding. 3 of those specifically, of those, all are on track, but noting dependencies for 3 of those in respect of other partners. So specifically, one recommendation that we wanted to bring to the committee just now in respect of a proposal that it be put forward through the next cycle for consideration of discharge is preliminary report recommendation 17, which relates to training for the SPA complaints and conduct team being consolidated and broadened in order to ensure the right skill set and up-to-date knowledge of complaint handling best practice in other sectors. So within the report, we've listed 3 formal qualifications that the team have undertaken over the last year or so. 2 of those through Queen Margaret, and then most recently with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, and the report details the key learning outcomes from those courses. Additionally, as I referenced earlier on, the team have undertaken a review of wider best practice. And whilst we recognise that actually continuous professional development should be an ongoing process, subject to the committee's agreement, we propose to submit this for discharge. The other recommendation that I would mention, and it's of the 4 which are outstanding, is a further one that we hope to close fairly shortly, which is recommendation 59 in respect of the SPA making a statement in its annual report and accounts around about the suitability of Police Scotland complaint handling arrangements. And as you know, it's our intention to do that following the committee today, where the committee has considered the full annual reports, provided that we would make a statement in the 21-22 rather annual report and accounts. Otherwise, the update in the report covers the recent meetings as part of national governance and reporting arrangements, and as well as the timescale for subsequent meetings, which will culminate in the publication of the 3rd thematic progress report, covering the period to the end of March. And that's currently anticipated to be published prior to the June Scottish parliamentary recess. Finally, members will note that the public consultation on recommendations from the review, which will require or are likely to require legislative change or the introduction of new legislation, that public consultation commenced on the 24th of May and will run to the 16th of August, following which the Scottish Government intends to bring forward a bill and regulations. So happy to take any questions, and as I say, a specific request for consideration around preliminary report 17.
Okay, appreciate the update there, Darren. Does anybody have any comments or questions? No. Okay, so in relation to that very specific request that Darren's made there to submit the preliminary report recommendation 17 for discharge via the national governance structures, are you content for us to move that forward, accept that recommendation? Okay, so thank you very much for that, Dan, and that is accepted. So now moving on to 6.2, which is Police Scotland's update on Dame Eilish's recommendations. So ACC Spears.
Thanks very much, Alistair. Just a couple of comments from myself to support the paper that you have, and Dan's helpfully indicated that we're moving into or the government are moving into a phase of consultation on legislative change requirements. So from our perspective, there's at least 35 recommendations made by DMAILISH which would require legislative change. So this is a significant piece of consultation that the government are entering into, and we will participate like others in the course of that. Within my report at 2.2, it highlights that very recently, in fact within the last week, we took a number of recommendations to the Strategic Oversight Group, a further 6 recommendations proposed for closure, and I'm pleased that they were supported at the Oversight Group, and they will go forward to the next ministerial group. There also are another 5 recommendations within 2.2 where we are scheduled and on track to take them forward to meet the June deadline for the Strategic Oversight Group also. So from a Police Scotland perspective, we are working really hard against all the recommendations which is within our gift. I'm also really grateful for the work that HMICS are doing, because before we put forward any recommendations for closure, they have an endorsement from HMICS, and I was really keen that we weren't seen just to be trying to check our own homework. So Elaine and her team are doing a great job in terms of scrutinising those recommendations, and only will they go forward if they are fully endorsed by HMICS. So again, detail is contained within the report, and I'm pleased with the progress that the team are making in this regard, and happy just to pause there. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Alan. Obviously, there was a nice segue there, Elaine, for the work, the importance of the work that HMI are providing, to make sure that, as Alan phrased it, Police Scotland are not marking their own homework, that its recommendations are going forward through the governance system, and being proposed for closure because they've been delivered. You've got all that checking work going on. So it links in well. So before I open it up, is there any comments, questions, anything you'd like to add at this stage?
Just that the last tranche of recommendations were quite wide-ranging. So again, the benefits of ourselves being involved is we're able to look right across work that's been done across a number of business areas in Police Scotland. And indeed where we ourselves have actually inspected those particular areas. So one of them, for instance, being third-party reporting, was actually put back to the practitioners working group for further discussion amongst all the stakeholders, which was worthwhile. And we indicated that actually the wider issue of third-party reporting and it being used as a signpost for people from underrepresented groups to be able to make a complaint about the police. The actual third-party reporting itself is a recommendation that we have outstanding in our 2021 hate crime inspection. So we know exactly who's trying to take that forward. We know the business area within Police Scotland and indeed the Scottish Government partners. But as Mr. Spears pointed out earlier, all the work that Police Scotland are doing in relation to transparency and accessibility using the QR code comes into play with this as well. So there's good linkage across different business areas. And as I say, ourselves have an oversight of a number of areas of improvement, I think has been beneficial, I hope.
Thank you very much for that, Elaine. That's very helpful. Open it up. Does anybody have any comments or questions at this stage? Just a couple of comments then from me. I don't think that you can overstate the importance of the work that DMAILISH has undertaken, and I actually really welcome the approach that's been taken by the SPA and by Police Scotland and delivering these recommendations. And it's clear for a number of them there is a lot of critical interdependencies there. So listening to Elaine there, actually identifying and picking up, where those interdependencies lie, and we should be taking things forward. That's really, a good assurance for us to hear that. And obviously we see the reports that come through from the HMI in relation to these areas. I think you're right as well to welcome that the government is now, moving forward to that consultation on what legislative change is necessary to bring Dame Eilish, to life, the report to life. And I think you said that, Alan, that at least 35 of the recommendations need legislative change. That is significant. So the time period, this work will be ongoing, for some considerable period of time together. But I think the level of joint working and the focus and the prioritisation of it has been excellent to date, and it needs to remain at that level. So really welcome the discussion and the points on that. Colette, I see you've raised your hand.
Hi, Chair. It was just to let you know that I've been informed this morning that this is Elaine's last meeting at the committee. She's leaving HMICS.
That's very kind of you, Colette, to come in. So Elaine, you're leaving the HMI. Where are you going, if you don't mind me asking you?
No, I don't mind. I've completed my 30 years with Police Scotland. So coincidentally, this secondment comes to an end at the end of June. So I will be passing over to another AIC who will take forward this work, rest assured.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that the future will be bright for you, and congratulations on completing your 30 years service within Police Scotland. And can I just, on behalf of my fellow committee members, thank you for the contributions, which, as I've just said, have been really important and invaluable to us in terms of seeking assurance. So thank you for your contributions to that, and thank you for your wider contribution to policing in Scotland, and enjoy the future.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. So we now move on to agenda item number 7, which is professional boundaries. I've got John Patterson, but I'm presuming that ACC Spears is going to lead us through this one. So it's a report for discussion.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just going to make an introductory comment. I'm going to invite Kat Henderson, who's one of our detective superintendents and actually the author of the report, just to make a couple of comments. So I guess just to put this report into some context, it probably doesn't take me to highlight across the UK a number of matters that have been very front and centre in the media following the sort of tragic death of Sarah Everard. And there was an absolute push across the whole of the UK, where every police force having a look at their approach internally within the organisation to matters which we've described here as professional boundaries, which would include those instances where officers potentially abuse their position and overstep the mark, if you want for a better description, in terms of their actions and their course of conduct. So really grateful for the work that Katrina has led on in this space, and with your indulgence, I'll just allow her to draw one or two highlights from her paper.
I appreciate the introduction there, Alan, and Katrina, as the author of this extremely important paper, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee members. You've all had sight of the executive summary that I've compiled, which reflects some of the detail of the ongoing work around professional boundaries. I'm just going to pull out some key points in furtherance to Mr. Spears' introductory comments. Clearly, Police Scotland fully recognise the clear requirement for our officers and staff to maintain professional boundaries and adhere to our standards of professional behaviour. Tackling this subject of professional boundaries is a real designated priority for Police Scotland, as well as Mr. Spears has said, the rest of the UK policing. As part of this, we are committed to undertaking review of what's occurred in the past and carrying on some ongoing work and preventions activity in the future to prevent instances where these professional boundaries are clearly breached. Following the recent conviction that we've already referred to in respect of the murder of Sarah Everard, Police Scotland commissioned a review of all our complaints and conduct matters which contained a sexual circumstance having occurred between the 1st of January 2017 and the 21st of October 2021, which were reported to or within Police Scotland. Of note, during the course of this review, we found that over this 4 3/4 year period, 410 reports had been received throughout the country. These having been received via a wide range of sources, whether that be from members of the public, complaints about the police, internal reporting, intelligence reports or anonymous reporting. Some of the key points that have been noted from the review are that, firstly, we, Police Scotland, have seen a year-on-year increase on reporting of such matters since 2018. This can, in certain circumstances, be reflective of an increased confidence to report. The most prevalent reports related to sexual assault, inappropriate comments and inappropriate messages. 150 of the 410 reports received related to off-duty matters. Reassuringly, the case review identified no significant issues in terms of the quality of individual investigations, and it was found that where a report outlined a breach of professional boundaries, the investigation had been carried out thoroughly, led by a senior investigating officer and was supported by other specialist officers, all of which was underpinned by a robust investigative strategy, irrespective of who the offender was. There were a broad range of recorded outcomes. In terms of some of the key outcomes, I can provide some summarised points.
Yeah.
Of the 410 reports, 118 were identified as criminal and reported to COPFS, 292 being identified as non-criminal, and 150 reports related to off-duty matters, as I said. Other outcomes in terms of investigations included verbal and written warnings being given, improvement action, memorandums being sent to division, and officers or staff members having resigned or retired prior to the completion of proceedings, which is often the case, as we know. As part of this work, we continue as a department to engage in the relevant National Police Chiefs Council UK forums in respect of subjects related to professional boundaries to allow us to harness best practice and keep abreast of trends and take on board any learning opportunities. Following the review, we recognise there are clear opportunities for us to enhance organisational behaviours within Police Scotland and raise awareness of our standards of professional behaviour. And we are currently undertaking a broad range of actions and preventions activities with the intention that these next steps be progressed over the forthcoming 12 months. Some of the activities I've referred to include the creation of a Professional Standards Department Preventions and Professionalism Governance Board structure to coordinate our broad-ranging activity and provide the delivery vehicle for the recommendations identified as a result of this review. It will give us clear governance of what actions have been undertaken and the traction of those. We have also commenced the delivery of a prevention strategy across the organisation, which will raise awareness of our standards of professional behaviour and aims to ensure that our officers, staff and our leaders are provided with relevant advice, knowledge and guidance to support the work. That's a broad positional update of the work carried out to date and highlights of the intentions going forward. So I'm more than happy to take any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you very much for that. Katrina, Alan, I see you've raised your hand, so before I open it up to members, if you could come in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alistair. I just really wanted to underpin everything that Kat said and the amount of effort that we put into this. I mean, I think we're the first to acknowledge that both officers and staff that we have across Police Scotland hold really privileged positions, and our position is that it's imperative that they act with integrity and professionalism at all times. You know, upholding public trust and confidence for us is absolutely vital, and every inference, regardless of the source of the information from a Police Scotland perspective, will be thoroughly investigated. And I think the work that Kat's done in this space probably demonstrates that. And I just really wanted to absolutely underpin our ongoing commitment in this space, that Police Scotland has no tolerance for any dip in the standards or professional behaviours of our officers and staff. So I just really wanted to reinforce that position before you draw some questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Alan. So it's opened up to members now, and I see that Grant has raised his hand. So Grant.
Thanks, Chair. And Kat, thank you very much indeed for the very clear presentation of this report into this very important subject. It's very much welcomed. My question is really in relation to the next steps and your reference to a number of recommendations and tasks that Police Scotland are taking forward. I wonder if you or perhaps ACC Spears could actually comment on how you will measure the effectiveness and impact of these next steps.
Kat's probably looking at me and I'm looking at Kat, so I'll jump in and I'll invite Kat to add a comment. It's a really good observation, Grant, in terms of going forward. I think from a Police Scotland perspective, we have been really open and transparent in our absolute desire to try and be an organisation that has no tolerance for misogynistic types of behaviours within the organisation. And what I would suggest that, even in the last 6 months, we've seen a greater confidence inside the organisation with officers and staff coming forward and reporting concerns that they do have. So I think it's really important that we look at how we're delivering on the recommendations and probably not just measure success by statistics. So the number of reports that we've reviewed are the number of reports that we've got. We've already taken steps. You know, we recognise that quite often officers can be inappropriate in their use of social media and their use of WhatsApp groups. And a few weeks ago, again, we put clear guidance across the force for every officer and staff in their use of those types of social media apps. So it may be that one of the more effective ways to bring some information back here would be to report a couple of times over the next 12 months on progress against the recommendations. Some of this work will overlap with other themes that's ongoing in the organisation: equality, diversity, inclusion. Fiona Taylor, DCC, is taking that forward. Mr. Graham is taking forward activity around misogyny. So there are clear overlaps, but I think it would be really useful from our perspective to be probably scrutinised and challenged by yourselves, and happy to try and bring a report back around the sort of progression of our recommendations and our proactivity in this space.
Thank you. I very much welcome that. Thank you. I think that's a great way forward.
Fiona.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think I'd like to echo Grant's thanks to you, Alan, Kat, and the team for being open to challenge, but also being curious yourself about what has happened in the past and how can we learn from it and how can we go forwards. So in my mind is, how do we know what had happened? So Kat, it would be helpful for me to better understand. You said you did a review, so did that have any police federations, so just input into that, or any externality to it? How did you conduct your review? You talked about the numbers you reviewed, and so was it a paper exercise, or did you interview and check and test? I'd be interested to know of the 410 reports, the breakdown between public and staff who'd raised concerns or allegations. I'd be interested in, of the 410, what the outcome was, upheld, not upheld. And just that piece that Alan talked about. So we've got, I'm assuming at some stage Rona Malone raised a concern but wasn't listened to. And that I recognise is before 2017, and the force has most certainly put a lot of effort into doing things. So we've got the Northern Ireland Police Service review that will look at that, and as Alan says, that there's other pieces. I would be interested, and I don't know, Chair, if it's for us or whether it's for you to progress with other chairs of committees, that whole system. So the whole piece of work that Police Scotland are doing in terms of developing a progressive culture, you know, eliminating some of the issues that have been highlighted, whether it's through the Employment Tribunal or through Day Mailish, would be helpful for us to get a sense of. So my kind of summary there for Kat is who was involved in the review, how was it carried out, was it a paper review or were there individual interviews, and of the 410 reports, breakdown public and staff, and upheld, not upheld, and do we have a sense of the people who raised the concerns, were they content? And I look forward to the further information about learning a bit more granular detail about just what are the learning points, what was it you picked up?
Thank you,
Kat, do you want
Fiona.
to come in and respond?
Yeah, will do, thank you. So it was an internal PSD case review that we carried out, Fiona, that was largely paper-based. We generated a level of independence in terms of the approach to reviewers by switching over geographical boundaries. So people undertaking each review worked in a different geographical area, if you like. We tasked the superintendents for each work stream to take ownership of the reviews within their own area, having oversight of the quality, and we had generated a bespoke template relevant to each business area, to make sure there was consistency around about the nature and content of the review undertaken. That sort of summarises how we undertook the review, if that meets your requirements.
Yeah, and I suppose it's just that the question, are you content that there was a sufficiency of independence and a sufficiency of challenge in that?
Yes, we are. We were quite robust in terms of the template that came back, in terms of each one was individually populated, so we were able to audit and review the nature and the extent and the depth of the review that was undertaken.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
In terms of your further question, I can give you a wee bit more about the demographic. So it was 353 officers and 7 members of staff, with a quantity of 28 unidentified persons.
Okay, but in terms of, was this about staff raising concerns rather than the public?
So all these were generated through a broad spectrum of reporting measures, because we can obviously get, so we've looked at complaints about the police, anonymous reports through Integrity Matters, reporting in general terms from members of the public. So the reports were generated from numerous different channels.
So the people who raised concerns were a mix of the public and staff. Okay.
They were.
Okay. You content there, Fiona, at this stage?
Content with that bit, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you've got your hand raised, so.
Yeah, can I ask, it makes reference to 44 officers resigning or retired during proceedings. Can I ask how many officers have been sacked for, such behaviour?
I'm happy to pick that one up. I think Paul, from our perspective, it's about the right outcome. It doesn't always just mean an officer being dismissed from the organisation. So a large proportion of officers who are progressing to a gross misconduct hearing find themselves in a position where they'll resign before that hearing takes place. So the outcomes through gross misconduct proceedings are far fewer because of that. But some of the information you're asking for is detail that will be contained within the papers that I regularly bring to you in the private session of the SPA board, and you'll be aware that there are some levels of confidentiality in the handling of gross misconduct outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any final questions on this? No, so I can't overstate, just how strongly we support the improvements that Police Scotland are seeking to bring about in terms of professional boundaries, and we really welcome that the case review. We've spoken there about the methodology that was undertaken, and we appreciate that there are confidentialities that cut right across any work that you do within this type of area, but it is getting to the desired outcomes in terms of professional boundaries that's important, and we really look forward to seeing how you progress the recommendations that are made within the fuller report. And I think Grant's question at the outset is a key one. How will you measure effectiveness and the impact of those recommendations? There is work, from what I've heard in responses, still to be undertaken to make sure that we get the appropriate methods, methodology, and definitions of the types of outcomes that we want to achieve and how we'll measure them. But we look forward to that happening. And I think the final thing that came out is there is a lot of work going on in other parts of the organisation, in terms of EDI, in terms of misogyny, and other related work. And it's making sure that we can draw this all together. And I think, I'm sure Police Scotland have the governance structures and oversight boards, to make sure that does join together. But I think one of the actions that I would quite like to take from this is, just to make sure that I can see that and bring that assurance back to my committee members here, because it's important. Anybody got anything to add at this point to this conversation? Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to the committee work plan. So Colette would welcome input from anybody around the areas of business that are due in the coming year, and if there's anything that we should be picking up on that we aren't, or areas that we're planning that are not in the right priority, any feedback on that from committee members would be welcome. But as presented at the moment, are you all content with it? Okay, thank you for that. So that brings us to the close of the public session. I'd just like to thank all the participants and all the observers. If you're not part of the private session,